We were just finishing up an executive session, so sorry we're running late. We tried to get done at 6 o'clock, but didn't quite make that. So we'll go ahead and start our council meeting. Council meeting number 19-24. Today is Tuesday, October 1, 2024. It is 20 minutes after 6 p.m., and our first order is to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, for the record, we will establish who's here. Councilor Pillsbury.
Present.
Councilor Fournier.
Here.
Councilor Lawrence.
Here.
Councilor Benoit.
Here.
Councilor Smith.
Present.
Councilor Pilch.
Here.
And the chair, John Egan, is here. 7 for 7. Way to go. Our next item is to waive the reading of the minutes. I always feel bad, Chris, that these minutes are so great, and all we do is ever waive them, and nobody ever gets to hear it. But anyway, it would take a while, but thank you. We're going to be waiving the minutes of meeting number 18-24 held on September 17th, and to accept the minutes as printed.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here for that meeting.
I'm abstaining too.
Councilor Fournier.
Aye.
Councilor Lawrence.
Here. Yep.
Councilor Benoit.
Yes.
Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Vice Chair Pilch.
Yes.
Who was chair for that meeting. All right, the minutes are adopted. Our next item is announcements. I have a couple. Actually, more than a couple. I have a few, and then we'll go down the line, see if others have some announcements. We've gotten back in the groove with establishing district meetings for the four voting districts in our community. It's a chance, informal, for the representative on the council who represent those 4 different districts to hear from constituents. Informal gathering held in various places around the community, mostly in the evenings to try and accommodate schedules, and it's a chance to come and share an opportunity about what may be on your mind, somewhat like the 15 minutes that's on every meeting for people to come in and talk, but this would be a more extended time. So we've had a couple. The next one coming up is District 2 next week, Tuesday, October 8th at Wolf's Neck Center. And then a little bit later this month, District 3 will be on Thursday, October 24th at South Freeport Church, and I believe 6 o'clock is the time for both of those. So 6 p.m. on October 8th at Wolf's Neck for District 2, and 6 p.m. on October 24th at South Freeport Church for District 3. Taxpayers can book a meeting with the assessor through the assessor's page of our website if they have specific questions or concerns about the valuation that may have just showed up in their mailbox. They can schedule a 30-minute in-office or web meeting, whichever is more convenient. Information and application form for Freeport's new property tax assistance or stabilization is available at the town's website, at the town manager's office, counter at Town Hall, and also at the Freeport Community Library. Owners and renters who are 65 and older with household income and assets that do not exceed the program maximums may be eligible for a rebate of up to $750 of the taxes or the rent paid on their primary residence. Drop-in meetings with staff to verify eligibility will be available on October 7th, 9th, and 10th. No appointment necessary. Applications are due by 6 p.m. on October 10th. So if you think you are eligible but you're not sure, please come to one of the meetings to find out. And if you are eligible, we ask you to get your application in by the 10th. If you'd like more information or would like to apply but are not able to stop into Town Hall during the hours of operation, please contact the Finance Department, 865-4743, and it's option 1. Absentee ballots for the November 5th election will be available starting next Monday, the 7th of October. Candidates have been encouraged to utilize the vote411.org website to present their biographies and platforms for their candidacy. And we're just taking a note that Dan Libby retired after 25 years of service to the town of Freeport from our Public Works Department. Thank you very much for your time, and I apologize that I wasn't able to get to his retirement party. So congratulations on that milestone, Dan. Other announcements from councilors? All right, we will move on to information exchange. This is a chance for councilors to share what may be going on in their district, committees, or other correspondence they may have heard from. Any particular items of information exchange? Dan?
Quick one is a question that's come up in my district about the train, which was silent for many years and is now blowing its horn again. So is there a change to our quiet zone?
So I actually have an answer to that.
Excellent.
I love it when I can do that. There's no change to the quiet zone that we're finding. However, within a quiet zone, it doesn't take away the need to blow the horn if their engineer or the driver feels like there are situations, and one of the situations that I was told often will create an issue this time of year is deer near or at the tracks. The other thing that our esteemed our esteemed code officer reminded me of is that quiet zone does not necessarily carry over to some freight transport that has happened. So I had an email earlier today. That's what we've received on first glance. We need to call the person back because our recommendation is that we go through the NEPRA process and see what we can kind of glean. But the answer is no, we still have a quiet zone, and but that there are situations that they can break that quiet zone, and we're not giving, it's not absolute silence guaranteed.
It seems, maybe not every train, but it seems more consistent isn't the right word, frequent.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not an odd occasional thing. It's a pretty common thing for the last couple of days anyway.
Might be staffing changes too at the railroad. Other items? Joanna?
The Social Racial Equity Committee met last week. Basically, we've tasked them with discussing their structure moving forward, whether they want to be ad hoc or permanent or transition to a community organization. They are a very productive group, but right now they're taking some time to sort of find their footing and their direction. Sophie and I have kind of taken a step back for the time being to allow them to have that discussion for now, and then we'll revisit that in a couple of months. Just wanted to share that. Also, the Fit Up Grant Committee met again last week after a bit of a summertime hiatus. We awarded a grant to Grande Burrito, which will be right in front of Double Barrel and Jameson Tavern, right in downtown. We gave them a match of $5,500. Even though it has been kind of quiet lately, we will see some more projects in the pipeline, so I hear. So Brett will be talking more about that later on in the agenda.
All right. Any other counselors for information exchange? Eric?
Just wanted to share that I have heard from at least one constituent based on the letter that was sent out on the senior housing tax rebate program, expressing some concern about the lack of details in what assets are being considered for those limits. And so I am encouraging anyone who does have those concerns to take advantage of those drop-in sessions that John listed.
So in addition to that, if I may, I heard the same concern. While council did not put that specifically in the ordinance, you've tasked staff with saying and assets, so I figure that it's my job to kind of come up with the parameters for that. I've actually added language online that lists out the specific income, what makes up income that is in the ordinance, and then taken my best stab at what reasonably would be the assets based upon the conversations that we had in ordinance committee. So I took some liberties. You might want to go online, click the box that says learn more about the program. When you do that, it takes you to a page, and at the bottom of that page it says, and what are assets and income? And I've defined both. If you don't like how I've defined it, please let me know, because I could then make some changes.
I'll just add, last Thursday, Darrell and I had the privilege and honor to attend Chief Paul Connolly's retirement party at the Public Safety Building. It was a big turnout. The press was there, great food and beverage, too, so thanks to the staff for putting that out. And some really nice things were said about Paul and his 38, is that it, 38 years? 28 years of service to the Freeport Public Safety and the Fire Department. So along with the retirement of Dan Libby, certainly big transition there with Paul Connolly leaving with that amount of tenure. So we send Paul with our best wishes. I don't see anything else from information exchange. Sophie will go to the town manager's report.
So I have a couple of things. The first, I just wanted to follow up on the conversations that town council has had about firearms discharge and talk a little bit about where staff is to try to help support the direction that I heard coming out of that. And if I'm wrong, this is an awesome time for you to tell me and for me to change gears. But so during the conversations, what I heard from council was, you know, we wanted to understand the scope of the problem. And from the community, I heard it's a community neighbor-to-neighbor issue. I saw lots of heads nodding up at the dais. But I also heard that some people are really not comfortable approaching their neighbors. And I don't think saying, well, gee, you should be able to approach your neighbor and walking away makes a ton of sense. So what Chief Goodman and I have talked about is actually going and doing a more proactive reach out with members of the community in those areas where we know there are issues. We know there were 3 kind of big issues. We also really want to kind of change maybe some of the response that PD has done to maybe not, if it's late in the evening, maybe not want to come back, but do some follow-up maybe with Glenn, who is our alternative response officer, to maybe help begin to facilitate some of these neighbor-to-neighbor meetings. I really think that Inland Fisheries and Wildlife had some ideas that might help us mitigate some of the issues, but allow people to do what they want to do primarily on their own property. The other thing that has come up, though, is based on the concerns we've heard, I believe it would be prudent for town staff to make a referral to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife about whether or not we might have at least one of the ranges or places where people are doing a lot of target practicing that might qualify as a range that should be regulated by current state law. And I need to talk a little bit more with Chief Goodman about that, but the thought being there are requirements if you have a range that is being used more than occasionally. And I don't know that there's a fee or anything with it, you just have to meet certain requirements. But that's not a town ordinance, it's a state law that IF&W would kind of take care of. Yes?
My concern, that's private property we're talking.
So the law is kind of specific on when it has to have, the activity has to have started after a certain date, and it has to be kind of commercially in nature or much more routine. Yeah, it is private property, but it's state law. It's not like we're trying to take a law and shoehorn it in to fix this. If you have a target shooting endeavor that you're shooting consistently at, not I go out every once in a while and shoot some, but consistently, every week, every weekend, for periods of time, then it really becomes up to the state. And those complaints that when they came in, probably in hindsight, and I'm using the 2020 glasses, because I'm not blaming law enforcement at all, but a referral probably should be made in those instances to the state to look into it.
I think we want to be careful. I hope there's documentation, and I think by engaging the PD to go out and have a conversation first, I think that's very proactive, and that's a positive step in the right direction. We had a lot of people in here, and, I just don't want to have a perception that we're impeding on rights or whatever that people have. So we've got to be very clear that that can't happen.
Yeah, and I think this is what we saw in the chambers clearly identified to me why it can't always be a neighbor to neighbor. I think it was pretty contentious in here, so I think this is a great step to kind of mediate some of those clearly contentious conversations. And I do want to be clear that I'm absolutely thrilled about the public response we had. I think that's how we do our jobs the best. And also, that wasn't the process of a public hearing. If we were to go through the public hearing process, I'm sure we would hear more diverse perspectives, so.
Oh, can I continue on with my report? Would that be okay? All right. The other major issue that I seem to be fielding a lot, along with questions about the property tax relief program, it's campaign season, and there are signs everywhere, and some people don't like signs. And so I just want to reiterate for council and the hordes and hundreds of people that I'm sure are watching at home with bated breath, that the state has we call it a new law, and that's just because it was adopted in the last 20 years. I think it was probably closer to 5 or 10, but that says that temporary signs can be placed in the right-of-way. And while I know I have a home, and I like to think of my lawn as going out to the edge of the pavement or the gravel, that's not where your property actually begins. It actually begins usually many feet back from that. And the difference is the right-of-way. So people can put signs up to 32 square feet in the right-of-way as long as they don't impede people's ability to travel safely, whether it's a bike or a car, or a pedestrian. They can only be in the right-of-way for 12 weeks per calendar year. Political signs, or not political, but they can, they have to, they can't be placed less than 30 feet from a sign conveying the same message. And if you're going to put a sign up, it has to have your name, your contact information, and the date it was put up, because it's a total of 12 weeks, but for some purposes, it can be 6 weeks in some places and 6 weeks in another. So I want, our code office is being inundated with complaints about signs right now. We've had some complaint about signs, like the sign next door being too close to the voting area because you got to be 250 feet. Every time we get a complaint like that, we address it. Chris goes out with her handy dandy measure, and we make sure that there are no signs related to the ballots, any of them, for the election, because this is a voting location up until Election Day. So just to make sure you're aware that that can happen. The other thing is, if anybody calls you because they've lost a sign that was in the right-of-way that they would like to put up someplace else, Earl goes out and collects all of the signs that should be there, picks them up, and they can be picked up at Public Works during regular business hours. So we're not throwing them away, we're not stealing signs. If you're missing it, go see Earl. Sound good?
That's good.
And the last one is, we have an ordinance committee, we just confirmed tonight. The next ordinance committee is going to be next Monday at 5 PM here-ish, somewhere on this end of the building. There we go.
Okay, that's it?
That's what I got.
Thank you, Sophie. Our next item is public comment on non-agenda items. So if anybody's here to speak on an item that is not on our agenda, but you'd like to address the council, generally it's you present your item, and there may be a question or two, but it's really not a dialogue. We do ask members of the public to try and stick to the 3 minutes per comment period. And again, this is for items that are not on our agenda. We do have a public hearing, and we're setting some public hearings later on our agenda. So anyway, please introduce yourself and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Bob Stevens. I live at 50 Moose Crossing. I'm representing Freeport Climate Action Now. I understand that the town manager has been looking or arranged for the looking at unexpended ARPA funds that have been allocated to other organizations that will not be used, committed by December 31, 2024. And we are encouraged by that, and also hope that a report will be made and the council will be able to act, if it so deems, as within a period that will allow that to include possible allocation of those funds that would otherwise have to be forfeited to the United States to be applied to the Electrify Freeport rebate program. That's what I wanted to convey tonight. And also, there are also some unallocated funds, I believe, that are available for allocation, and I believe that some consideration is being given to possibly establishing a lender equipment library, which Mason is here to support. One last comment. With the referendum coming up, I've had a lot of people say, well, what does that actually mean, cost, if in fact the town decides to approve that referendum and the council ends up agreeing to purchase the property for the price that is being discussed, which may not be true, it may be lower, but how much will that really cost if it is bonded at what is a typical municipal interest rate for a typical period of time, such as 20 years? And that would be an interesting hypothetical to be put out to the public, making sure that it is not an assurance that this is the way it would go, but that we know people are concerned about what might happen, and this is one possibility. Thank you.
We may already have that answer.
So,
I missed it?
well, not quite yet, but we're one step ahead of you. Or maybe you already made the rule when you were on council, but when we put together a referendum question that involves the borrowing of any money, Freeport requires that we put that statement of the borrowing, expected interest rate, and cost.
Thank you for reminding me.
That's okay. It was a
Way
good
ahead
point.
of us, as usual.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else?
John, can I add something? So because I don't have the sample ballots yet to have them posted, the language and the treasurer's statement for the bond issues is on the town clerk's page under elections.
Great. All right, not seeing any further comments, we'll move on. There will be a chance later on in the agenda for anyone attending virtually to make a public comment on non-agenda items. Our next item is the start of our action items. We have a consent agenda. We will be holding one public hearing and setting 3 public hearings for our next meeting. The consent agenda has just a couple of things on it. which I will read. It's a permit request for the use of town property on October 11th by Meeting House Arts. It's to consider action to accept some donations to the Freeport Community Library and also to approve a liquor license renewal for Good Fire Brewing Company LLC. Is there any reason why we should take any of these items off the consent agenda for discussion separately? All right. Be it ordered that the October 1st, 2024 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. All right. On to our first public hearing, item.
One correction.
Oh,
Give me,
okay.
the published time that the Freeport, I'm sorry, listen to me, Meeting House Arts, the use of the public space out in the front of Town Hall is 4 to 6 and not 3 to 4. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Got it. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Okay, item number 234-24, to consider action relative to approving adopted amendments to Chapter 46, our General Assistance Ordinance. Councilor Pillsbury, could you please open the public hearing and read the be it ordained?
Be it ordained that amendments to Chapter 46, General Assistance Ordinance and Appendices A to H for the period October 1, 2024 to September 30, 2025 be approved. And
If anyone's concerned about what this is or has questions about it, there's materials on the table in the back. We're making an amendment to our General Assistance Ordinance. There's a memo from staff that explains it. If anyone's here for the public hearing, this is the chance to address the council on this particular item.
Do I need to second this first?
I'm sorry, I thought I heard a second. Yeah, go ahead, Chip.
I second
Okay.
it.
So the public hearing is open. Anyone wish to address the council on this item? Do we have anybody online?
Just Jim.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring the discussion up to the council. Any questions for the manager? We all have a memo in our package here about the proposed changes. Okay, splendid job on the memo, Sophie. No questions. It is relatively straightforward. We're essentially updating our maximums.
I would just suggest, unless I hear otherwise from council, we're really finding some issues with the housing allotment. And I would like to have Brett and Chris and I work with DHS to see what it would entail to do an appropriate survey and look for next year to potentially get permission to increase the maximums for that. Just so you're aware, if we do it and we don't have it approved, we eat the whole cost of it. If we do it the right way and have it approved, we get 70% of the cost reimbursed.
Question on that, I'm not sure if we could do that, but with that being said, we know housing's going to be an issue. Could ARPA money be used to help offset that? Because I think, in my opinion, if I'm looking for the money, if it is appropriate to be used to help offset the cost of housing that people are going to be struggling with, so we don't have a more significant impact on our budget, I would really like to take a hard look at that, because I think that's a far more need than, maybe lending out electrical appliances or something.
So the issue with that is that we have to have the ARPA money under contract by December 31st of 2024. And I can't just put an allocation. We're used to just allocating it and say, this is what we're going to do with it. They actually expect a contract. So I'd have to go to a third party to hold that. I will say right now and for the next year, we do expect, the state has been kind of lenient as long as we do a good job documenting the rationale for why we've exceeded the maximum. They've been kind of lenient with that. I don't know how much longer they will be, but they usually make decisions when they roll out the maximums for the next year. So we don't have major changes happen off season.
Wouldn't the same rule apply, though, that if we're offering something in excess of what the GA maximum is, that we have to cover the whole thing?
Not if we are really good at documenting right now, and I think they are going to start. So with COVID and some of the issues that came after COVID, we got some discretion to do more. I just think that the state is in general not extending those continuously. So it would just be very helpful. When I see a housing allowance for a family, let me just quickly pull it up, a family of, here we go, let's say 4, so a couple with 2 kids, you would expect let's just say even 1. The allowance here for heated is $1,600 a month, and we're not seeing very many apartments at $1,600 a month, heated. So I think for right now, they are allowing that discretion. I don't think that discretion is going to continue ad infinitum.
Well, I understand the timing with ARPA funds, but I completely agree with Councilor Fornia. That would be an excellent use for that, to be able to help our residents most in need, particularly coming into the winter. So
Let me see, let me talk with Jessica and see if we so there was some money left in a housing gap that is there, was allocated to FCS. It's not under contract, but I wonder if we could create a fund for that to be used. The issue is, we can't reallocate it.
Right.
And it would have to be used by the end of the year. And right now, the state's willing to reimburse us.
Yeah.
So-
End of this calendar year?
It has to
End
be
of the fiscal
under
year.
contract by 12/31/24, has to be completely
Spent by
used
26, yeah.
by 26.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd encourage you to try and find a solution
Yeah.
for that. I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Darryl. Any other questions about the amendments to the GA ordinance? All right, looks like we're ready to vote. We have it seconded. All those in favor of the amendments?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 7-0, thank you. Our next item is 235-24. This is setting a public hearing for a consent agreement for a particular property that's been in discussion for quite a while. Councilor Fornia, could you please read the be it order to set the public hearing?
Be it ordered that the public hearing be set for October 15, 2024, at the town council meeting starting at 6 p.m. in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, to discuss a consent agreement between the town of Freeport and the Cleveland Capella Revocable Trust, of 1992 to resolve a land violation at 28 Cunningham, stemming from action taken prior to the trust ownership of this parcel.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Just a tiny bit of context before we set the public hearing. Sophie?
Sure, this actually predates me by quite a bit, my arrival in Freeport, but from what I've been able to glean, the Cunningham, the trust bought this parcel thinking that everything was fine and wanted to do some upgrades to the property, and being the wonderful law-abiding people that they are, called the code officer to come on out and help them figure out how to permit what they wanted to do. And when the code officer got there, he saw shoreline zoning violations. And what has happened over the last 3 years has been the owners have fixed all of the violations that were there, but based on what council has agreed to permit in the past, really wants to look at, there are a couple things that you'll notice in the consent. They want to leave the way they've been constructed, a deck that was a little bit too big, I think maybe some leftover pieces or an older walkway. And the intent of this agreement is to allow that to stay the way it is, but not to be expanded further. This does deviate a little bit from the way we normally would do a consent. Oftentimes, when we find consents in front of council, it's because maybe somebody has built a garage on a piece of property that they didn't have a permit for, and they don't want to tear it down. We, most of the time, would attach a notice of violation and also require that they pay fees and reimburse the town for legal fees and pay fines. As I looked at this languished for years. And unfortunately, by languishing, it bounced back and forth between the town's attorney and the trust's attorney, like a ping pong ball. And every time it hit something, it was racking up an expense. And so when I talked to the code officer was working under direction that he had been given with regard to this. Really, they have corrected the things that we would ask them to correct. The things that are left are things that the council in the past wouldn't have a problem leaving, just to make sure that it didn't get the violations that would now be cured by the consent didn't grow. And, the owners really, while they came to the table to try to resolve this, and I don't feel like it is fair for the town, given that we were complicit in the fees that were charged, to expect them to also pay our fees here. If we had cleaned this up in a quicker fashion, the bill wouldn't be as high, which is why I haven't agreed to why I'm suggesting no fines and no reimbursement. The other piece here is the notice of violation. I have a concern attaching that because this document is a public document. They didn't violate. The way it had to be written made it seem as though they were the ones that did something wrong. And everything is on the face of the earth the way staff is recommending it should be. So it's not like we have to use that as the litmus for them coming into compliance with the consent. So for the owners, they very much wanted, it's upsetting if you really are trying to follow all the rules and you get caught short, and then when you read the document, it kind of makes you feel like you've done something bad. And it seemed reasonable for us in this particular case to not attach that. The change in...
Can I just ask a question? I'm in firm agreement with that and completely agree, but should the property change hands again and there's a different code officer, will a different code officer find a similar violation in the future if there's no flag in the file that there was a notice of violation?
The file...
Sent it over in 2024?
The file will include the notice. It's in the property file. It is part of the
Okay.
property file.
Okay.
It's just not going to be attached
We
and
just don't want to go through this again.
broadcast. Exactly. The only other thing I would like to say is we had reference in the consent that was online to Exhibit A. We had, the Capalas and I had agreed that we would strike Exhibit A. I just didn't catch a couple places where it is. So what's in front of you removes all reference to Exhibit A. which would be the notice of violation.
Okay. All right, so just a reminder, we're not voting on this tonight, we're just setting a public hearing, but that gives us the context for what we'll take action on at our next meeting on the 15th, I believe. This is when it's set. Thank you for that explanation. I agree, this has been going on for a really long time. Glad that we can get it resolved. Any other questions before we go ahead and set the public hearing? All right, all those in favor of setting the public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, public hearing is set for 2 weeks.
Mr. Chair. The last time we had a consent, I did not have my ducks in a row for how to move that along, and I'm learning, see? But there are 11 abutters here. The Kapalas know who they are. I think they were going to make some effort to just touch base with them. It's on the docket for tomorrow. It might end up being Thursday, but this week, the notice will go out to the abutters with the consent included in it, so everybody will see it.
Okay.
Sophie, did you say you pulled out all references to Exhibit A?
I found one just sitting here, so I'll go back.
Section
again.
9?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, our next item is to set another public hearing for the 15th of October. This is item number 236-24, to consider action relative to setting a public hearing to discuss a proposed text amendment to Section 104, which includes definitions, and Section 535 related to cannabis establishments. Councilor Lawrence, could you please read the be it ordered so we can set the public hearing?
Sure. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for October 15th, 2024, at the council meeting starting at 6 p.m. in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, to discuss proposed text amendments to Section 104, definitions in Sections 535, cannabis establishment of Chapter 21, Freeport zoning ordinance. The proposed amendments would allow medical cannabis dispensaries cultivation facility as an allowable use under the existing use of the medical cannabis cultivation facility.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Caroline, it seems like we're hanging on one word here, the word dispensary. Is that really what this is?
Yes, you might remember that a while back when we finally got the cannabis regulations before you, the state rules had changed. And so when you guys were considering those, one of the current property owners came forward and informed you that they wanted to actually pursue the option to operate their business as a registered dispensary. That was not something that was crafted into either our land use ordinance or licensing ordinance. You might remember we allowed medical under the caregiver rules, which have limitations to the number of plants, the number of patients. It didn't allow retail, but we had to allow a point of service, or we allowed adult use, no retail ever anywhere in Freeport. So the applicant, after that meeting, came forward to the planning board and wanted to allow dispensary. We took it to the planning board. They were open to it, working it into the existing framework. We did need some legal review to make it work well with our ordinance. So it basically adds a new definition, or a couple new definitions, to allow a medical cannabis dispensary cultivation facility as a type of medical cultivation facility with a clear restriction that retail stores are not prohibited. So when you add a dispensary, unlike
Not allowed.
Not allowed.
Right, they are not allowed. So when you add a dispensary, it's slightly different than the caregiver, again, because it does not have a limit on the number of patients or plants. It actually could allow retail. And unlike a caregiver, the municipality does have the ability to regulate point-of-sale transactions, which are different than a retail storefront. So knowing the desires of Freeport, the needs of the applicant really to operate their business in the same way, just a different license, this has all been crafted to prohibit retail stores and also for a dispensary to prohibit the point-of-sale transactions at the site. Way more than you wanted to know.
So I'll ask this now, and maybe I'll remember it next time at our public hearing too, but how is the dispensary exchanging product for payment with its members if it's not a retail.
My understanding from talking to our cultivation facilities here, that they are cultivating here, but actually selling it in other locations. They have storefronts in other municipalities, so they're growing it here and using it for other purposes. Although today the state has very strict rules on caregivers. They can operate in a facility if they have certain relations, and they have to have certain separations, and it's a lot of work for them. So in this case, they want to continue to grow, but they could do it under one state license and continue to bring it elsewhere for sales. And they are aware that this specifically prohibits those two types of sales on site.
We have a really good history of transparency with this applicant, so I'm not worried about this particular business. I'm worried about others saying, oh, well, I'm a dispensary, so I'm going to be able to, quote unquote, have commerce with my members, which to the average person walking by looks an awful lot like a retail operation. So I just want to make sure that that is clear, that the activity of adding the dispensary, and maybe this is what was discussed at the planning board, but that the activity of operating a dispensary doesn't sort of walk and talk like a retail, even though we're not calling it that.
It is clear, and it was important to be clear, because now when they operate as a caregiver, you can tell them you can't have a storefront, but you can't restrict somebody going there to actually buy their product. We're not allowed to do that. So this actually adds that level of restriction, which is why it was really important to work that into the language and be
Yeah.
clear
Great.
that neither of those two types of transactions are allowed at these facilities in the town of Freeport.
Just want to make sure. That's been our consistent message up to now. I just want to make sure that was really the way this
Yeah,
modification
I
was
think
being
in
interpreted.
the planning board worked this into the existing framework. The two establishments we have are in the same zone. They have size limitations already. Should you up licenses in the future or things change, you could revisit if you wanted to put some like size limitations on it. But at this point, our licenses would all be used under the current
Okay.
setup.
Thank you for that clarification. Other questions for Caroline before we set the public hearing? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of setting the public hearing to make text amendments to Chapter 66, item number 237-24, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Was that 237 or 236?
Sorry, 236. Getting ahead of myself. The next public hearing is item 237, thank you, Joanna, -24, also related to cannabis, text amendments to Chapter 66. The one we just voted on was Section 104 and Section 535. Councilor Benoit, can you please read the be it ordered so we can have a conversation?
Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for October 15th, 2024 at the council meeting starting at 6 p.m. in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, to discuss proposed text amendments to Chapter 66, Town of Freeport Cannabis Establishment Licensing Ordinance.
Second.
All right, been moved and seconded. Is this continuation of the same language or is it a different
It is a
topic?
continuation, but I do want to point a couple things out to you. So it's really continuation to mirror the new land uses. It doesn't change the two license type as the medical cultivation facility license or medical manufacturing and processing license. It just kind of, in the background, in the definition, allows the cultivation only of, under this new registration type under the state. So you might remember when you established this license, you had a certain process where we had an initial rollout, you changed the license, or you added more. So we had the initial phase, and the applicants, if they got through the first phase, had a year to come back to you. So what we have at this point is a bunch of pending applications for licenses. We do know that if this change passes, you will have one of those applicants that's operating under 4 licenses now come back to you. So what they would need to do ultimately is either, if they're operating exactly the same way with exactly the same people, they might have the potential to switch. If they are changing and want to pursue a different license, they would need to withdraw kind of the pending licenses and then come in when the licenses become available under the dispensary. So right now, there is no change to the number of licenses proposed. I do think once you get through this first round with the people in the queue and people that are switching, it is something that you could revisit at a later date, the number of overall licenses, but right now where we have everyone in a pending status, it's not the time.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions for Caroline? All right, the item's been moved and seconded. 237-24, amendments to Chapter 66 relating to licensing ordinance of cannabis. All those in favor of setting the public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thanks, Caroline. Our next item is number 238-24. This is to consider action relative to appropriating funds in the Fit Up Grant Program. Councilor Smith, could you please read the item?
Be it ordered that $60,000 of Destination Freeport Tax Increment Finance Program Development Fund be appropriated to replenish the funds in the Fit Up Grant Program.
I'll second that. Seconded. Brett, you want to give us an update on where we are here?
Sure, appreciate the opportunity. Brett Richardson, the Development Director for the town, and I just want to preface this conversation by saying this Fit Up program has probably been the funnest thing I've done here in Freeport, getting a chance to know these entrepreneurs and help them succeed in town. So just to do a quick background, the Fit Up program came out of the downtown vision, and one of the big recommendations of the downtown vision was that the town should take an active role to support filling vacant spaces downtown and also to help our retail sector and business sector diversify and add more experiential offerings to the retail. So this program came out of that as a pilot, and I'm happy to share that we're having a great response to the program. Real estate's tricky. You know, if you think about an entrepreneur who's trying to find a space, that's a process that takes time and it's risky. And so these resources have really come in a targeted way that have made deals happen, that have made businesses fill spaces. So there's a memo in the packet that shows the mix of businesses and the impact that we've had with this program. And I think it's important to note that so far, $35,000 have been actively spent. We've got 2 other projects that were originally approved. That would equal another $20,000 of town dollars. Those projects are still out there. They want to take advantage of this program. Councilor Benoit mentioned that we had a meeting recently, and because those projects had dragged on a little bit in implementation, the committee decided that it was appropriate to have those applicants reapply. So we firmly believe that those 2 other projects are going to come in, and that means that this project will be fully subscribed or close to fully subscribed with 55,000 of the original 60 actually out the door, creating jobs, generating impact, getting good media coverage for the town, and helping entrepreneurs diversify our economy. I want to point out, too, that of these 5 businesses that we've supported, 1 is retail, but it's a boutique retail that filled a space that was vacant for a very long time. And if you get a chance to go upstairs to Loom there on Main Street, they've done an incredible job. And I think I put in front of you all a letter from the property owner that described the fact that these fit-up dollars really made that deal happen and helped de-risk the project for the property owner and also the entrepreneur. We have a new yoga studio as a result of this program. We're supporting local aquaculture entrepreneurs, another health and fitness business, and then, as Councilor Benoit mentioned, we're going to have a great little burrito bar that's going to come into Main Street as well. So this program is having an impact. It's been a lot of fun to work on. The committee, it's important, too, that at this last meeting, the committee reiterated their support for the program and their desire to continue to serve on the committee. They've done a great job, I think, being good steward of the resources to make sure we're tracking the money and being thoughtful about that. And so we're looking for another $60,000 to move this forward. And I think it's important to note, too, the funding source is the destination TIF. So this isn't coming out of the general fund. This is coming out of a specific fund that was targeted to do this type of activity. Currently, there's about $548,000 in that TIF fund. That fund supplies resources that allow ongoing projects like sidewalks and other things to happen. So of that 548, there's currently, as of June 30, a balance of $111,786 left that we could use for a variety of uses. Those resources are not encumbered. So basically what we're asking for is roughly half of the unencumbered money in the destination TIF to keep this going and support entrepreneurship in Freeport.
Fantastic. Thanks for the great update, Brett. Questions for Brett? Comments? Dan?
Could you refresh our memory about the other program we approved at the same time, the $40,000 Momentum Grant program?
Sure,
And
yeah.
do you think we should renew that?
That's a good one, too. So in addition to the fit-up program, which was targeted towards private investment in business spaces, commercial spaces, we also have the Momentum program, which the council allocated $40,000. And that's been impactful as well. Meeting House Arts is taking advantage of it to have activity on Main Street at night, projecting art on walls. We had a project by Joyce Vayu proposed to add games, cornhole and a chess table to Memorial Park. Pinkies are coming to town with support from this program that really probably wouldn't have happened without the town support stepping in. And so there's a little bit of resources left, but I think that just like Fit Up, with one more cycle, will be fully allocated too. So it's a great use of resources. I think it's creating tangible outcomes, momentum from the downtown vision, and that's important to the community right now. So these are good programs that really are sort of dangling a carrot to residents and businesses to take advantage and bring their creativity to Freeport.
Do you think we should renew that one too?
I do, yeah, I do.
So
Maybe double it.
I'm shaking my head. So, Brett is new in the role of a town staff person, and we brought him into town on July 1st, and we put him in an office, but we didn't really give him a big economic development budget to work with. So one of the things he and I are working through now is what are the priorities for the FY26. I feel like I don't want to lose the momentum in the Fit Up grant. And I think we can roll out the momentum grant in July after we could go through the regular budget process. But this one seemed so closely aligned with the destination TIF that it kind of seemed like a no-brainer.
I want to add to that too, happy to take further questions, but the timing of this is important. Joanna mentioned that it slowed down a little bit over the summer, and that's normal. People who are in a commercial space, they're taking advantage of that. And what you find is that in the fall and then through the winter, you find businesses looking for commercial spaces. So to have these resources available now means that they'll be available at a critical time when people are looking for their next space.
And I could spend a long time talking about how much I've also enjoyed being on this committee. It's great fun and feels highly impactful. It's not a lot of money in terms of $60,000, but it goes so far in our community. I have a little bit of like a logistics question. The application was hosted on the FEDC website, which I believe is down.
Correct.
So we should probably do some housekeeping on getting that onto the town website.
We absolutely do, because Brett also needs to work with our new communications person, who will be here next Monday for the first day, to build out the economic development website, the webpage that's in the manager's office section of the website.
Is the application or information
put it-
about this?
We will add that. Maybe we'll add it not so pretty once you give us more money, and then wait for Pete to make it beautiful, but we'll get it there.
Daryl?
I guess I've got a question, Brent. When I look at the $60,000, I like the idea of businesses and coming in. So what are you getting for the biggest bang for the buck of the money we're presenting to bring more businesses in? I would argue that this is bringing businesses to town, which was part of the plan for downtown. Pinky's nice or whatever, but I'm just wondering, do we need to invest a little bit more in here, so hopefully get these empty spots filled?
I do. I think honestly, the 60-40 split's pretty good, because I think that businesses also want to locate in an area where there's dynamic activity. And I think when you go to a place that has public art, you're entering a community that cares about itself and is investing in its public spaces. And I think that's important to attract private investment. So I wrestle with that question myself. I think they're both worthy of additional funding, I like that 60-40 split.
I think we can always talk about what it would look like to increase the budget if we felt like it during the budget phase for 2025.
The other thing
2026.
too, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Chip,
is that as
Hang on just a minute, Brett. Chip, you got a question?
Well, let him finish the question.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think, part of this, not the slowness, but it's taken a little while to get these resources out. It takes a little while for people to learn about them. And I think what we're finding with the Pinkies project, for example, they knew that the momentum funds were there, and they created a plan that leveraged matching funds. And so they've got additional donations that have come in. So I think dangling that carrot with enough lead time as awareness builds will lead to more matches. And I think a similar leverage that you see with FitUp with $4 of private investment for every dollar. And that's probably conservative. That's probably undercounting the investment. That's pretty powerful.
Chip?
So my question is I like the program. I think we're at a time where we need this program, but how much longer do we have this program? When do we, we're giving money to businesses, and we're a government entity, and I don't know that that's sustainable. And it should be the town, it seems like we're paying people to come to town, right? Because we can, but at some point that should not be. People try to build a town that people want to come here, because we didn't have this 20, 10, 15 years ago. So you know what I'm saying? And we can't. It's not sustainable when we have other things that we can use this money for.
Yep, it's a good point. I'd like to kind of go back to some great questions that came out when this program was originally proposed. And it's important to note that the criteria for eligibility has to do with sort of long-term fixed assets that transform a space and that don't go with a tenant if they choose to leave. And so if we did a walking tour of the spaces that have used these resources, and part of the submission to get paid is also a before and after photo collage, it's pretty compelling. And the good news is that these spaces are probably now fitted up for another decade or even longer, when before, we're talking 90s, early 2000s. So I don't disagree, but I think by being thoughtful about how we structure the eligibility, I think we're being good stewards of the resource, and we're going to have good spaces.
I'm not saying that we're not being that. I'm just saying, how long do we continue this on for? Because, 30 years from now, we're still doing the same thing. I would say that we're not doing our job.
If I may.
Yeah.
So I think it's important when we look at the type of funding that we're suggesting here, which is why I didn't want to move it into the general fund budget. This is tax increment financing district money. This is an allowed use within that district. And the purpose of the district is to encourage business growth, development, and diversity. So the council gets to decide whether to change the TIF, whether to reallocate how much money is sheltered, how to allocate those funds. But eventually, the funds dry up, because TIFs are not a forever thing. And right now, what we know is this particular TIF is a valid TIF through 2029, 2027. We have till 2029 to expend the funds.
And I agree with that, Chip. I think it's important to revisit it over time. And I'll say the obvious, where we're still trying to kind of rehab our reputation as being welcoming to business. And so until that is rehabbed, we keep going, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't saying shut it down today. I wasn't saying shut it down soon. I just want to start the conversation, because eventually we need to do that. And if we're fitting up spaces that are owned by landlords,
It's an important thing to keep track of, no question.
What, with the unobligated balance in the TIF, did we have plans for how we're going to use that? Are we not going to be able to do something by expending this money?
No. What we have planned has already been encumbered.
Okay.
So we will get more money this year coming in, and then we'll have to sit in front of council during the budget process and decide how you want to use those funds.
Great. Do we, I think it's a compelling story to show the $1 to $4.15 match. What was the application process? Was it pretty robust? And kind of where I'm leading on this is, do we need to look at potentially a higher than 1 to 1 match? Do we want to try to stretch it farther and show a more compelling investment in our downtown that's not seated by us?
I think if you look at the email, it's a great question. If you look at the email from Ben Hamilton that I put on the desk there, he made a point that the simplicity of the application process is pretty important. I think the critical components are they need 2 quotes. And there was actually one project that walked away from the resources due to timing. They couldn't get a second quote in time for when they wanted to open, and so they forego a relatively small grant because time was more important than money. So I think the fact that the application process requires that they either be a new business or they're activating a vacant space is pretty critical. And then they can get extra points if they're experiential and other components. But the key due diligence is that there's 2 quotes, that the investments stay with the building. And I think, for example, I want to highlight Mind and Body Fitness at 15 Main Street. Her project was $2,750, and she matched that. It's a relatively small amount of money. She worked really hard to find a space. She wanted to be in Freeport, and this is a resource that was extremely impactful for her. And I think a low bar it supports the entrepreneurs. I also want to highlight, I remember, Councilor Pillsbury, one of the questions that you asked when we were discussing this program was, are these going to be big companies that don't need the resources and they're taking advantage of it? And I think the pilot phase has proven that really these resources are reaching local people who are trying to open a business in Freeport, which is hard to do. And so that low bar combined with a good due diligence, that's where I would recommend we stay.
That also brings up something that we discussed last meeting of kind of how do you calculate that in kind? So there's that piece as well. If someone's putting in non-monetary effort, if we want to capture that or not.
Yeah, it's true. There's volunteer sweat labor that goes into these. This is a conservative 4 to 1. It's probably much higher than that.
I think you absolutely want to capture that. I mean, it tells the story, and we may not all be sitting here someday, and if we want some version of this to continue or some sort of support for the downtown and business vibrancy of our town, you need to be selling this to the nth degree. So, yeah, I'd see if you can figure out a way to capture that.
It's good. We'll do.
All right. Any other questions? All right, so the vote for moving $60,000 from the TIF into the fit-up program, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, fantastic.
Thank you very much.
All right, our last action item this evening is item number 239-24, to consider action relative to leasing a portion of town-owned property at 3 South Freeport Road, known as the Dunning Boatyard. Councilor Smith, could you please read the beat order so we can start conversation?
Yes, let me just pull up the amendment. Be it ordered that the town manager is authorized to execute an agreement on behalf of the town of Freeport with Falls Point Marine, Inc., to lease a portion of the town-owned property located at 3 South Freeport Road for a 1-year period beginning on July 1st, 2024, on terms substantially similar to those presented to the Town Council on October 1st, 2024, on the condition that the lease is executed by both parties by October 31st, 2024. If a new lease is not executed by October 31st, the town manager is directed to issue a 30-day 100-day notice to the tenant on November 1st, that the current month-to-month holdover period will end on November 30th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Context on the process to get us here?
Yes. So as you will recall, this process started back almost exactly 6 months ago. We had this item on our agenda on the April 2nd meeting of this year that was tabled until it went to Municipal Facilities Committee. The Municipal Facilities Committee has been working on this for 5 months since then, with the understanding from the council that the desire of the council was to establish a 1-year and only 1-year lease to the current tenant who had been in a holdover month-to-month situation for several years. So there was a lot of back and forth, and I provided you some updates with that through the last few months. At this last Municipal Facilities Committee meeting, it's where we thought we were going to be very close, particularly in terms of naming what the leased premises are and what the boundaries of the leased premises are, which had been a point of contention through some of our other conversations. The Director of Public Works was at the Municipal Facilities Committee and presented an updated survey of the property where we confirmed where the rights of way are along South Freeport Road. And it is a complicated right-of-way, in part because that bend in South Freeport Road, right where it transitions from South Street to South Freeport Road, that road shifted quite a number of years ago, but the right-of-way did not entirely shift with it. So it's oddly shaped, which you can see on the screen right now with a bit of a jag, but it also moves quite a bit into the town-owned property that is known as Dunning Boatyard. We were able to confirm with the the Director of Public Works that that is in fact a state right-of-way. So we ourselves, as the town of Freeport, do not have the ability to change that right-of-way. And so we were working with that right-of-way with the understanding that then the leased premises would need to be set with setbacks of 10 feet back from the right-of-way, and that's what the lease had been drafted to reflect. Upon the request of the tenant, we verified whether or not that was the correct setback for commercial waterfront property, working waterfront. And so in conversation with the code enforcement officer, we actually were able to verify that the setback is 15 feet from the right-of-way, which significantly reduces the usable space that we have been leasing up until this point. Knowing that the council wanted to move forward with making sure that the leased premises were in fact within the boundaries of what we were allowed to lease, that changed the footprint quite dramatically, essentially eliminating any usable, leasable space from what had been, as part of the lease, seasonal storage, particularly of floats and docks, to the tenant. It really limits the leasable space very much to essentially the building, a small area in front of the building, and a sort of triangle to the side of the building. But it comes very close to the corner of the building. The tenant, I think we were all a bit dismayed as we realized how much that shrinks the footprint. However, the tenant expressed the fact that it was still his desire to lease the premises, particularly with the advantage of it being accessible to the water at high tide with it not being on pavement. The ability to dump riprap, in particular on gravel, and then load it onto a barge is of particular interest, and that small space beside the building would still allow him to do that. However, knowing that the footprint shrank considerably, we actually did reduce the amount of the rent that we were requesting, which is reflected in the draft.
Are the dollar amounts there?
Yes, so it's $1,000.
2,000 down to 1,000?
Down to 1,000. It's essentially cut in half. So that's the background of where we arrived at the last committee meeting. The adjustment on the timing, it had been always the understanding of both the Municipal Facilities Committee and the council, I believe, that regardless of when the lease was executed, the effective date would be July 1st. The added deadline of getting this done is just so that we can move this along after it's been on our desks for 6 months.
All right, and so the action of our vote here is to authorize the town manager to make final negotiations on the lease term as it's best reflected here with us. Any other questions about that?
I do have a question. Is the action requesting that we're approving the lease as it's presented to us tonight? Because there have been a couple of different versions of the lease that have been floated around.
It's the lease that was most recently drafted by the town manager.
By the town manager,
That
okay.
reflects the intent of the council, I believe. There will be some modest changes to language, I think, which is what we're still working out. But there were more recent proposed changes. The ones that significantly change the intent of the council in leasing the space are not what we are voting on now.
Yeah, there's a little subjectivity there, substantially similar,
Yeah.
which
Yes.
we're trusting the manager to
Yes.
uphold that of what we've been under, our impression of the lease, particularly the start date, and now a cleaner definition of the actual lease premises by meets and bounds needs to be documented, and so I think we've made that clear, so.
And I think it sounds like the biggest direction here is the 31st deadline of getting this moved along, so.
Getting it signed by
Yeah.
October 31st.
Yes,
Right.
correct. Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
It's not a public hearing, but could you go to the podium, please, if you have a question?
Hi, my name is Chalmers Hardenberg. I live at 11 Somerset. I've been trying to figure out in the draft lease why there's a distinction between 10 TEN feet and parenthesis 15 feet. And as a former attorney, I don't think that's good drafting. And I think it should be either 10 or 15.
So as I said, when we communicated, it's a typo, and I'll fix it.
What?
It's a typo, is what she's saying. That reflects, I mean, this still is in draft form, but it reflects the fact that it was 10, we had to change it to 15, and the numeral got changed, but the word did not.
Okay, the second question is, my thought was, and I just wanted some clarity on this, that the 15 feet is the setback from the property line, not from the right-of-way, the town right-of-way, the state
Well,
right-of-way.
it's the state right-of-way, which means that is the property line, is
So
my understanding.
Our ordinance requires frontage setbacks to come from the right-of-way and not the property line.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, we're confirming the July 1st start of the lease with the intention of getting this cleaned up, understanding the original intent from council and signed by both parties on July 31st, by July 31st.
By October 31st.
What month am I in? Yes, October 31st.
Right. Okay, thanks for that explanation, Councillor Smith. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, our next item is for public comment for anyone attending the meeting virtually. Sophie, do we have anyone attending virtually?
We
And
have
if-
our fabulous radio host. However, our Public Works Director is obviously attending virtually because I had a family member I had somebody contact NEMPRA about the train whistle. And here's the answer that came back. The owners of the rail line CSX Transportation have been performing maintenance on 3 crossings in Freeport. While this work is being performed, the crossings are effectively taken offline, which requires the train crews to stop the train at the crossing, blow the horn, and have a conductor ensure that the train can pass safely over the crossing. Once this maintenance work is completed and the crossings are back online, the quiet zones will go back into effect.
There we go.
I just have to say that at 3 o'clock, Earl, Al Pressgraves, Caroline, and I were chatting amongst each other. And so this all happened.
Between now,
Yep.
then and now.
Pretty amazing.
It is. So no public comment from virtual attendees.
I think Jenny's okay.
All right, so that concludes our action items on the agenda. We have one item under other business, which is informal council planning for the fourth quarter. I'm assuming that's you,
So it
business
is,
manager.
unfortunately, the fourth quarter, we don't get to meet as much. And we're all racing towards the end of the year. And I just want to make sure that I'm prioritizing the things that council would like to prioritize. I've got a few things that I would like us to look at, and I just want to make sure that they are your priorities as well, and have you add your priorities to what I've got here. I think we had talked previously about council having the district meetings, but then bringing the climate action plan back for some path forward with that. So I'd be interested in kind of finding out how I can support that work. Also, Councilor Benoit and I are going to meet, whether it's virtually or in person, in the next week if we can. I'm doing some research around the ARPA money, reaching out to folks. We'd like to bring that back on the 15th, but I do think that that is a high priority. I would like to be able to take a little bit of other business time for you to talk with Brett, the development director, Caroline, and I about both community development and communications shifting. We've done a lot of internal work with that, and I just want to update the council and get some feedback on kind of what's working and what you might suggest we do moving forward. That feels a little bit like a workshop, maybe not the dais. I don't know what you think about that. And then one outlier that's been sitting out here for a long time, like ever since I got here, is the idea that we did all the downtown planning and then we kind of stopped. And even though work is happening on several of the charters, I don't think we've actually come back together and reported that out. And I know that there were some people that were very engaged in that process. So I would really like to hear from the council about, do we want to look at workshopping that? How would you like to work at getting that back? I think if we had some discussions now about that, it might end up being the first quarter if it's a community meeting, but I'd like to get that kind of identified. It's one of my thoughts.
Can I start with the last one?
Yeah.
I think that there has been when we went through the process and then set up the charters and then had public hearings on them, I think there was quite a bit of input and participation from the community, as well as feedback amongst counselors. It may have been a slightly different group at the time, but I think there's considerable amount of, let's say, executable items in that plan. And so if we're going to have, and I'm all in favor of having a conversation about how to keep that moving forward, maybe we can separate a priority, like, we already know how to do this, we already can do this, we already can do that, or with $500 we can do that. And then the bigger ones, which might need more budget authority or some, public hearing process for changing this or changing that, so that we can try and get some velocity on getting the things that are easy out front and going.
Great idea. And I think also there are some things in there that we might not have done through the route that was envisioned in the charter, but are either well underway or complete. And so I think if we could get Brett's Gantt chart reporting dashboard ready, I really think that that is something that we should take just some time to celebrate what we are doing and decide how to prioritize what we move forward, I think is kind of, and for that work, really, Caroline, Brett, Min, our assessor, and Earl are kind of the key internal group that's been working on that.
One thing, I won't be here, but that I would like to see, and you'll be hearing me saying this much more, but we talked about having a finance committee. I really would like to see that executed and established and organized prior to the budget season. I think that's so important that we do that.
Okay.
Just, you mentioned climate action plan, and I know when we were sitting with the Sustainability Advisory Board, we all kind of collectively looked at the calendar and realized that since the district meetings don't finish until the end of October and the council does not transact any business in November, that really pushes us into December. But I would say that I would like to see that come to the council, preferably the first meeting of December, if we haven't already filled that up with public hearings. But that, to get that done and moved so that we can really be considering that as part of our planning to begin with in 2025, I think would be very helpful, as well as making sure that that is, along with any changes we may choose to make, being considered as part of the comprehensive plan.
So and I'm sorry if I interrupted. Okay. One of our sustainability coordinator's last official acts was to take elements of the comp plan and identify how to best lay them into the comprehensive plan. I spent some time on a conference video with North Star and Caroline, and to talk about the upcoming Environment Committee meeting. And for many towns, that environment, for the comp plan, it's the community forum that's happening next Monday night. For a lot of community members, a lot of communities, that environment forum is actually used to talk about climate action. And as we were planning it, one of the things that I thought would be most helpful as we talked about climate action planning, that we look at what has already been done and really focus on prioritizing, asking residents who come to that to really provide some insight for council as to what are kind of the most important pieces. I suggested having it like a budget. Who knows if my suggestion will come out. But one of the things that I would be a little concerned with is having these two very different plans that both focus on land use and policy development and all of, the prioritization of what is important to the town. I like the idea of trying to fold in the most important priorities into the comp plan and then perhaps having council identify more. I think we want to talk when it comes back to council after you've had your conversations about maybe how to set this up in a way that is implementable. Is where I'd want to focus. And I don't know if some of that we want to kind of push towards the comp plan to help guide that in amongst all of the other things we want to implement. Kind of a thought.
This is kind of beyond Q4 of this year, but we did talk about having a pretty intentional goal-setting workshop. I would like to make sure we hit the ground running on that in 2025, which probably requires some planning in Q4.
As a council goals in general?
Yeah.
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 What, is that something that council would be comfortable setting early in the new councilor's tenure? So if we maybe could do it either at the end of December or the beginning of January, depending on what, beginning of
I
January?
think beginning of January,
That's when we used to do it.
yeah. And I would love to see that come out with some pieces from our plans that we have floating around that we want to bring down and actually see implemented.
Could maybe the special projects team or council leadership, one of the two, be willing to spend a little bit of time to make sure that when we roll that out to council, it has the parts and pieces? Because I have not seen your goal-setting process before. So either way would be helpful. Okay.
I think I'm on both of those.
Okay. Well, I think the only thing is whether or not Matt gets added, because I think it's you, Dan, and Matt this year on special projects.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? I mean, if we go past the fourth quarter, it takes me time to set staff up to keep up with you guys. So I think January would be great to help organize, but does that seem reasonable? Kind of, okay. Right.
Do we know offhand, I'm writing down in my notes that we try and have some kind of a council goal session by January 15th, but I don't even know what day of the week
Oh.
the 15th is. Is that at least past our first meeting plus a week? So,
That's Wednesday, and it's the third week, second full week, but the third week in January.
yeah, all right, so,
So we would have a meeting on the 7th.
okay.
And then
So, yeah, maybe somewhere around the 15th, 16th, somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
I think last year we did it on a Saturday.
Yep.
So you might want to maybe allow for that, would it be the 18th or
So perhaps the 11th.
11th or the 18th, yeah.
So I think one of those is a holiday weekend. We might
Right.
want to just stay away from holiday weekend.
18th is a holiday, yeah.
18th is the holiday.
Yeah.
So,
The 18th wouldn't be before January 15th.
but the 11th would, and do you want to just tell all of the candidates running that that's the date we're planning? And
Put it in their calendar.
yeah, we could do that, if that works. Chris, can you take care of that? Thank you. Chris, who's clearly coming down with something over there. And
Okay, great.
is that something that you normally would have senior staff at? Manager, assistant manager? What would you need for support for that?
The last one we had, I believe it was
Manager was there for
just the manager.
I
most
might,
of it.
I might ask my assistant
So,
to
yeah, I think the
join
two
in.
of you would be fine. I don't think we need to
Sorry,
drag.
I might
senior staff.
actually, yeah, I was gonna say, I
We-
might drag Brett just because he's here tonight.
We, I think in the past, the goals have been at a point where if we had questions that a department head might ask, we just defer to
Okay.
you or Caroline to go get that information.
Okay.
I don't think we need to require
Okay,
them
nice.
to come in on a Saturday. That's quite an ask. So, great. Any other comments about some planning there and setting those items up for reporting by the end of the fourth quarter? All right, so.
Should I make a motion that we
think that-
adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
We are adjourned. 5 to 8. Look at that.